for strikeouts in the game. 20.
Swung on and driven to deep left. It is hard. Number 8. Yankees win. Yankees win. Bernie Williams homers deep in the left field seat to lead off the 11th inning at a 1-run finish. And the Yankees beat the Orioles 5-4 to win Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. Burn, baby, burn. He's done it again.
Deep left. There it goes. Staring into history. He's done it. He has done it. 62. Aaron Judge is the American League single-season home run leader. The AL King. Case closed.
What is going on, baseball fans? Jeremy Lauderquente here for the Baseball Banter Broadcast. And as you saw in that open, we are continuing our series here, The State of the Franchise. From championship glory to rebuilding years, every team has a story. And today, the team that we are discussing is that of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And I'm honored to be joined by my guest at this time, Noah Pohle, from the Inside the Halos. So what's going on, man?
Hey, not much. What's going on with you?
Absolutely. Bringing some light to the Angels is what we're going to go through and do today. So as we begin the series, I always like to ask and kind of get gut reactions on the previous season. So what are your gut reaction feelings on the 2024 campaign for the Angels?
Coming away from 24 was tough for us. You know, obviously we had a lot of injuries throughout the year, and we did not end up anywhere close to the top of the division. We were actually last, below even the A's, who had a pretty nice season and a nice offseason as well. So my gut reaction was that of disappointment, but I also feel like we have a good little group of young players that is only going to continue to grow here in the next couple of years.
For sure. Definitely, signs looking up when it comes to the Angels. Now, you did make mention about some of the things to look forward to. So as we look at kind of the major acquisitions for this squad, some of the notable names of mention, Yusei Kikuchi, Travis d'Arnaud, Kevin Newman, Scott Kingery, picked up Ryan Noto on waivers, Tim Anderson, JD Davis. You know, of those moves, what's kind of the one that most stands out to you? And if there's an kind of under the radar move, what do you think about those as well?
For me, I think it's pretty clear that the biggest move this offseason for us was that of Yusei Kikuchi. Bringing in that established guy into our rotation is something that we've pretty sorely lacked. And even though he's been inconsistent in his career, I do think that his presence is going to help stabilize the rotation and bring some innings to a group that is really young.
No, for sure. There's a veteran presence that can really help, any rotation, but especially one that's kind of been in flux over the last several years. So definitely a big move. I think in kind of looking at what this upcoming season can be for the Angels, I thought Travis d'Arnaud was a big move. We've seen what he's been capable of with the Braves over the last few years and kind of been almost like a platoon guy, but he's been so valuable for the Braves. So it was kind of surprising to see him go. But I think that especially with your young catcher in Logan O'Hoppe, I think that he's going to be a guy that can truly help them. Now, as we look towards, some of the things that have kind of befallen the Angels over the last several years, it's been injuries. So some of the impact injuries in terms of, MLB.com's reporting has Zach Neto with a shoulder surgery in the offseason, Robert Stevenson with a torn UCL, and obviously we know Mike Trout has had his issues over the past couple of seasons. What's kind of the most impactful injury you think, and where do you see any other potential lingering issues in the future for this team in 25?
I think that Zach Neto injury is the huge key for us as we enter spring training now and break camp. Because if Zach Neto has to start on the injured list, then that means that somebody like Tim Anderson or maybe JD Davis, if one of those guys has a good spring, would be coming up. But Zach Neto was also seen taking fielding reps today. He's not cleared to throw across the diamond, but he's playing catch. So there's definitely progression on that front, but that's going to be a key one to see how much runway he actually gets in these spring games.
For
I
sure.
think I think the Stevenson injury as well. He was throwing in a bullpen and he was hitting like 90s, but I think that their move to put him on the 60-day IL for signing Jansen means that they're just being super cautious with a big money guy like that, and they're just going to take their time with that.
I agree entirely. Yeah, I think that Neto is a guy that from when they called him up was somebody that I was very intrigued by. Even beyond just the super high leg kick, very reminiscent for me of Jose Bautista with the Blue Jays. But I think that he has such a just presence to him, and I think that there's an opportunity where he can really, be an impact player for the Angels for a long time. So seeing how he progresses with that injury is definitely going to be something to kind of pay attention to.
Absolutely. He's a leader of the team too. The bond that him and Ohapi and guys like Mickey Muniak are building too there, it's something that's really special.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, you mentioned it a little while ago, but you have a young core that you can really build around and start to lay the groundwork for a championship caliber type team. And especially with Ron Washington, I think that he does such a good job, especially mentoring some of the younger players. And
Yeah, absolutely.
what he's capable of as the manager of this squad, to me, is something that could be very special for sure.
Yeah, and like you mentioned too, with bringing in guys like Travis d'Arnaud, he's a good mentor for somebody like Logan O'Hoppe. Also, Kenley Jansen coming in to mentor Ben Joyce, Kyle Hendricks for the rotation. We've got a group of guys outside of Ron Washington too who can help mentor this team.
100% for sure. Now, in looking at this team, who do you believe is the kind of X factor for the Angels?
To me, the X factor is Reed Detmers in the rotation in that number 5 spot. He's a guy who's arbitration eligible for the first time this offseason, so he's going to be on a guaranteed contract. And even though he's got option years left, I don't really see the Angels, viewing him as a candidate to go down unless he really, really struggles. Because if we send him down, then he's probably not looking at getting tendered a contract. And for somebody to fall that far like Reed Detmers would be really unfortunate. But last year under Barry Onright was his first year working under a new delivery. He in 2023 he would bring his hands up with his leg as he swung down towards the plate and through, but in 2024, he was a lot more still. And he also brought his release angle up by 6 degrees. And in 2023, his curveball, he would release at that high up angle, but everything else he was a little bit more on the side with. But he cleaned all that up, and now everything's coming from the same arm slot. And it's helping with his deception, but his command is something that really faltered. All you need to do is take a look at a StatCast pitch map from 2023 and 2024 to see where everything went wrong. His slider was down, his fastball was over the middle of the plate, and his curveball was not breaking, and neither was his changeup.
No, for sure. This is a guy who has, a no hitter under his belt. So definitely
Yes,
somebody that, the Angels can try to build around and try to rally around if they can kind of get him to clean up those mechanics and get himself into a position where he repeats that delivery more consistently and produces similar results. Not saying
absolutely.
that he's going to go out and throw a no hitter every day, but
Right.
being able to kind of be that type of a starter for Anaheim is definitely something that can be of a huge help. Now,
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think too that Nolan Shonwell is another guy who is pretty underrated. but I think that he's somebody who is 6'4", 220 pounds, and he just turned 23. And there is a good bit of physical projection left in him. I don't know if he's going to grow anymore, but I think that he will learn to tap into some more of his power. He
I
hit 13 home runs last year, and I think that number is going to go way up next year.
I think 100% along the same lines with you. I think that, and you saw it with the way that they kind of basically skipped the minor leagues with him. Being drafted and playing in the majors within the same calendar year. That isn't something that we see happen in Major League Baseball. You see those things in the NFL and the NBA where they go from college, from high school straight to the pros, but you don't see that happen in Major League Baseball where you get drafted and then you're in the majors within the same year. So this is a guy who can absolutely be a big time force, and if he can kind of, as you said, harness into that power a bit more, is a guy who can really produce on a grand scale for a team that is trying to rebuild and put themselves in a position to be much more competitive this year.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
for me, looking at this team and kind of, I kind of mentioned the player already, but my X factor is Travis d'Arnaud and what he's able to do as kind of a mentor to Logan O'Hoppe, what we've seen him be able to do as part of a tandem in Atlanta for the last couple of years, seeing what he's able to do on that aspect, what he does defensively, what he can do offensively, and we've seen him be able to produce. Most of the time when he's in kind of that backup role, he produces quite well. Obviously, when he's exposed and has more time as kind of like the everyday guy, that's where you start to see a bit more of his flaws. But I think that in pairing him with Logan O'Hoppe, this is the guy who can serve as that mentor and really show him how to take his game to the next level. I think that the sky of is absolutely the limit for Logan O'Hoppe. I think
Yeah,
very highly of him. So
I
for me,
think that that's one of the most resounding things as an Angels fan, coming from a ton of other fan bases, is just a lot of love for this guy. So I'm really excited to see how he works in a split role, maybe like 80 games to O'Hoppe and 40 to d'Arnaud, with d'Arnaud taking on some late game defensive replacements too, and how he works with the pitchers as well. And he's a guy that worked with Ron Washington over in Atlanta, so it's obvious that him and Perry are bringing their guys back with not only d'Arnaud but Soler as well.
yep. No, for sure. And like I said, I think that O'Hoppe is going to take a big step forward with having d'Arnaud there to kind of help him and mentor him. Now, as we look towards the future of this organization, the top prospect, according to MLB.com, is Caden Dana. What can you tell me about him, and if there's any other prospects that you're kind of high on heading into the season?
Yeah, Caden Dana was an 11th rounder, and he was a high school arm, and he was very projectable at the time. He had a pitchability like um, frame of his prospect value. And as he broke in with the Angels, it took him a little while, but this past year he really, really broke out after having a good year in 2023. But this year in 2024, in Double A, he pitched 23 games through 135 innings with a 2.52 ERA that was backed up by ERA estimators. Like his FIP was 3.16, and he struck out 147 batters in that time while only giving up 48 free passes. So
Definitely a good mix right there.
yeah, he works with a plus slider. It's got good finish. He's also got a slower curveball that is really more of a show me pitch to kind of steal strikes early in counts. He didn't really use that much at the major league level in his little cup of coffee. That may have been too soon. It definitely looked too soon. He was overmatched at the end of the year. But he also works with a plus changeup that the arrows going up on that pitch as well. He was throwing that against guys like Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker and making them look silly at the end of the year in the major leagues. And that fastball too. He's 20 years old last year, and he's already hitting 97 and he's sitting 94. So that arrow could definitely keep going up on his velocity too. And the
Absolutely.
fact that he's sustaining it over so long, I think, is the real difference maker in his prospect standpoint.
For sure, that it's definitely a good sign, him being able to maintain that velocity and kind of the movement on his pitches for sure.
My other top prospect on the Angels too is Christian Moore. He's the first round pick last year, and as with every first round pick, he's the only first round pick that's not on their 40-man roster over the last 6 years. So I think that this year is definitely the year that he's going to come up at some point. He got injured at the end of last year, and that may have affected his timeline as well. We might have seen him in September. You don't know if he didn't have that torn meniscus, but he came back and was hitting, and he was hitting before he was down too. He's only has 110 professional at bats, but in that time he's got a slash line of 347 average, 400 on base, and 584 slugging. So the guy can definitely rate.
Yeah, that's an impressive slash line for sure, especially for such a small sample size.
He was in Double-A for most of that time as well.
Now, when we go through this series, it's one of my favorite segments, and it's asking for a bold prediction. So, what do you think is a bold prediction for the Angels?
I think my bold prediction for the Angels is that 6 guys will hit 20 or more home runs this season from our lineup. And I think that those 6 guys, we have 8 guys that can realistically get there between Mike Trout, Jorge Soler, Taylor Ward, Luis Rengifo, who has never done it, but he hit 17 and 16 over 125 games twice. We have Zach Neto, who did it last year, Joe Adell, Logan O'Hoppe, they each did it last year for the first time as well, and Nolan Schanuel, a guy who we talked about earlier. I think that of those 8 guys, 6 of them can hit 20 bombs.
I honestly don't feel like that's such a bold prediction, especially with the way the game is played now, being so home run heavy and home run happy. I think that's a pretty safe bet as it comes to kind of bold predictions. But I mean, having 6 guys hit 20 means that your team's doing pretty well that year. So that shows for a kind of a good sign in terms of Angels production if you can get 6 guys with 20 bombs in 2025 for sure. Now, mine's a little bit more of a somber bold prediction, but I think Mike Trout gets traded. So,
okay.
yeah, yeah. So, when it comes to Trout, I live in South Jersey, so this is Trout country, and all the conversation is about him, going home to Philly and joining the Phillies. And I think that with the way that this team has been over the last several years, the fact that in his entire major league career, there's only been one time that they've made the postseason. The entire time that you had Trout and Ohtani and weren't able to make the playoffs, I think that frustration is going to start weighing on him, and that, the Angels, if they get off to a rough start, are going to look to try to recoup some of that value for Mike Trout before he gets hurt again. So I think that if the Angels get off to a rough start, that Mike Trout gets moved. Now, on the flip side of that, if Mike Trout stays healthy for the whole year, I think he wins the MVP again because he has that type of talent. He is just such a dynamic player. And when he's healthy, this is a player that can go down as the greatest of all time. And that's, not a easy comp to make or an easy statement to make. But I have no doubt that a healthy Mike Trout can win the MVP again.
I agree with your flip side, but I would say good luck to Perry in trying to unload that 6 years at nearly $40 million per year to any other team. I just don't think that there's any value in that contract, even if you would try to move him. And he's said himself, he's not going anywhere. I like that is a bold prediction. That's one bold prediction. You definitely hit that right on the bill.
Well, yeah, like I said, that's what I like about this segment is getting out there and kind of, pushing the boundaries a little bit. So,
yeah.
Now, as we kind of look and transition back towards the organization this year, what do you think is the biggest question mark facing the Angels in 2025?
For me, I think the biggest question is, does the young core take a tangible step forward? At the end of this year, do we look at the pitching mix and is it a little bit more settled than it was at this time? And the lineup as well. Do we have those 20 home run kind of hitters up and down the lineup, or is it a little bit more shaky than it was last year? I think that taking that step forward to where we can actually spend on maybe a guy like Dylan Cease or Vladimir Guerrero Jr., guys who are at the top of the next free agent class who can make a splash and maybe play alongside Trout at the end of his career. And Artie Moreno likes his big money guys, and Rendon only has 2 more years, so maybe they work some contract structure out where there's a lesser value for that first year when Rendon is still around, and then after that it goes up and up and up.
Yeah, so that kind of transitions me into my next question, and you kind of alluded to my thought on it, and what is the biggest frustration for Angels fans? Is it Rendon?
For me, it's Artie Moreno, honestly. Artie Moreno is the biggest frustration. I mean, there's still those ongoing lawsuits with Tyler Skaggs' family that are persisting. And he obviously was going to sell because the FBI was investigating him and his family was telling him, hey, this is not something that we should be involved with anymore. But he decided to keep it around. And I think that, to me, him hamstringing us in the past with those albatross contracts of first Hamilton and CJ Wilson and Pujols, and then now Rendon and Trout, even to an extent. I think that he's that biggest frustration for me. And if he keeps spending, if we do sign somebody like Vladimir Guerrero to a number that starts with a 5, I will have mixed feelings about it.
For sure.
Off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, in kind of looking around, Angels Twitter, it's definitely a lot of conversation about him. Artie Moreno is one of those guys that you think that just by spending money, it kind of would appease the fan base. And, we've had kind of different conversations here on the channel with different teams, with different, smaller market teams where their owner is the problem for not spending. And
yes.
Artie, it seems the problem is he's spending in the wrong places.
Yes. I do agree with that. And I think that like a team like the Brewers, the Rays, the Marlins, like their fan bases definitely have a lot more reason to be upset at their owners. Like I'm not upset about Artie's intentions. It's just the way that he has gone about it. The way that he has overstepped over our past GMs and forced guys like Billy Epler out. And now he's finally, I feel like, met a good match with Perry. I'm a fan of him, and it's just, yeah, it's definitely different than some other frustration of owners with their fan bases, but it's definitely real.
No, for sure. And I agree. I think that having Perry Minasian is kind of that good mix and that good balance to kind of keep Artie in check and to have a plan in place and to stick to that plan. So I definitely agree with you there. Having Perry is a good mix in that front office to kind of temper the craziness of Artie Moreno.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that does need to be tempered.
For sure. Yeah. When you see the, kind of the way that he went and got Josh Hamilton and CJ Wilson, like you mentioned, and even the Pujols contract, there's always the talk in like the advanced analytics community about not paying guys on the wrong side of the defensive spectrum, not paying guys over 30. And, it was all these different criteria when the Pujols contract was signed. It was like, these are all the red flags and he's just running past all of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because back in 2002, the Angels won with a very analytically based team. Right around the Moneyball era, we were on that. We were one of those innovating teams.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, they were. I mean, they beat Barry Bonds at the height of his powers, so it took a full team effort to be able to do such a thing.
Yeah.
Now, as we look at the on-field product for the Angels, how would you grade out the offense?
As a whole, and definitely with 2024 as a reference, I would give it a B minus. I think that the floor has improved, and there's going to be a lot of playing time for the young guys available. You didn't plug any major holes, and I think that there's a reasonable value from the bench. With guys like Kevin Newman and Travis Darno. Those guys are going to be. Those guys were above average guys very recently in their careers. Newman had a career year last year, but Darno, before tailing off a little bit in recent years, has had a very, very solid career. And those guys are going to be huge for the development, too, of our young players because they've been around and done it on playoff teams. So overall, I'm going to give the offense a B minus.
Yeah, so spot on in terms of my prediction, my pre-gaming for this series and preparation. I also had them at a B minus. I think that when you have a player like Mike Trout on the roster, you can't have anything less than a B minus. And a healthy Mike Trout will make this team better. I think that when
Yes.
you look at the young players that you have in Neto, in Ohapi, in Joe Adell, even to an extent in Mickey Moniak, a guy who some people would say is the worst number one draft pick in the last 10 years. But at the same point, this was a number one overall pick for a reason. And if they can start to kind of develop and get their footing underneath them at the major league level, these are guys who are capable of doing things. And like you said in your bold prediction, there are guys on this squad that are capable of hitting 20 plus home runs. And if you can get 6 of those 8, if you can get 5 of those 8 to hit, those 18 to 20, 25 home runs, that means the team is doing well offensively. And I think that this team has the makings of a team that has that potential offensively to be able to do some things that are really positive in the sport. So I agree with you. I think B minus was the grade that I also assigned to them in my preparation for this. Now, as we look to the pitching side of things, how would you grade out the pitching staff?
I would give the pitching staff a C minus as it currently stands, and I think that we have a lot of projectable pitchers, and a lot of them are on the 40-man roster as well. Guys like Sam Aldeguiri, Jack Kanowicz, along with Caden Dana and Reed Detmers, who we have talked about. But I think that anytime that you have Kyle Hendricks in that rotation slot, and looking at what Reed Detmers did last year, having those two guys in the rotation definitely brings a lot of the innings that you're going to be putting out there on a little bit of a tough road to win. And the bullpen as well. I mean, you have Kenley Jansen and you have Ben Joyce, but behind them, it's a cast of arms that are projectable, but without a whole lot of certainty. So I think that until guys like Tyler Anderson start to have another good year, I don't think that this is anything more than a C minus.
We are in lockstep, my friend. I also had him with a C minus in kind of preparing for this series. Again, like you said, a lot of questions, a lot of guys who have the kind of stuff that can project to be pretty good, that can project to be even great, but a lot more questions than answers when it comes to this squad and what they're going to be able to do on the pitching side of things. You have guys that come with a track record like a Kenley Jansen, a guy with some history behind him in Reed Detmers. But what are you going to get on a nightly basis? What are you going to get every 5 days from these starters? A guy like Kyle Hendricks has not been the same kind of player that he was, 4, 5, 6 years ago. What are you going to get from him on a nightly basis? So a lot of questions with some potential upside, but I agree with you. And kind of looking at this team right now, the pitching staff for me also grades out as a C minus. One of the other things that we like to look at is the divisional ranking predictions. And when it comes to Pacoda and Fangraphs, they have you at the bottom half of the division. Pacoda has you coming in at 4th in the division with 77 wins and 85 losses. Fangraphs has you listed at 5th in the AL West with 75 wins and 87 losses. Where do you see the Angels landing in your projections, and what does that win total look like?
I think for me, a win total is, I would say like we are a 74 to 77 win team. I think that like a safe number there would be 75. I think that there is definitely a good amount of projection in this team where we could get to an 80 win total. But I also think that if the beginning of the year doesn't look so great and by midseason we're out of contention, then some guys on 1 year deals are going to go, and that's going to drop the win total down the rest of the line, just because we're losing guys. So I also think that there's a little bit of a rivalry, between the Angels and the A's down there at the bottom of that AL West, and I'm hoping that we come in fourth ahead of them. But they also added some pieces this offseason, and they've got some hitters like Brent Rooker and Lawrence Butler in there. So we'll see. We'll see. I know it's going to be I expect it to be a bottom half finish.
Yeah. In my preparation, kind of examining the division as a whole, I think that you guys get a little higher than the projected win totals. I think that you end up with like 79, 78, 79 wins. But I do think that you're going to finish off in fifth place. I think that it is going to be a season long battle with that 500 mark for the Angels. I think that there are going to be some players that get dealt at the deadline, some of those 1 year contracts that you spoke about. And I do think, however, though, that the Angels start to see some strides being taken in the second half by some of their young players, by some of the call ups. And I think that that starts to lay the groundwork and the foundation for the future. Now, in speaking of the future, where do you see the state of the franchise for the Angels?
We're in a state of transition. Of the options that you gave me, I would say that we are about a 500 team, right in line with your projections. But I think that we more so have an identity of a team in transition, or a retooling team, if you will. I think that we have a bunch of guys on 1 year deals who are not long term pieces, like Yohan Moncada, who are just filling spots, and a bunch of guys on the bench who are just filling spots. And maybe some of the guys that we're starting eventually are going to be pushed into those bench roles if they prove that they're not starter material. But this is pretty much the year that we're going to be figuring that out, this year and next year, I believe. So that's where I would rank our state of the franchise.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of have it more as a team that's in rebuild mode, right? So, retooling, rebuilding kind of have different connotations. I think that for Anaheim, it's going to be a situation where the players that you picked up this year on 1 year deals are going to be guys that you look to move at the deadline to kind of recoup some of those prospect assets, and that it becomes a team that heavily focuses on the younger talent. And that to me is where it turns into a rebuild mode. Because when you rebuild and you start, prospect stacking, and you start looking towards having the young players come in and play those everyday roles and just letting them go out there, especially we spoke earlier about Ron Washington and his ability as a teacher, as an instructor. I think that having a young team is going to be the best type of team to have him employ, to have him, be the mentor, the leader, the manager over. And so for me, I think that as the season progresses, we're going to see, some of those tougher roads early on. And then you're going to see those guys get dealt that are on those 1 year deals. You're going to see Perry do a good job, I think, at the trade deadline of kind of recouping a ton of assets for the future of this franchise. So I don't think that it's going to be something where you're going to see necessarily a guy like Mike Trout get traded in legitimate fashion. But, guys like Yohan Moncada, like you mentioned, potentially a Travis d'Arnaud could get moved at the deadline, to kind of recoup some of those values. And then you're going to really see an influx of youth for this team. And that's kind of where I see the Angels heading in 2025.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I just also think that the way the Angels have run their organization over the last couple of years kind of tends towards those prospects being closer to the major leagues and them getting their shots pretty early on. So That's why I considered it more of a retool. But I mean, you saw guys like Logan O'Hoppe, who was acquired straight up from Brandon Marsh, and then that September he got his shot. Sam Aldeguiri last year, we got him for Carlos Estevez, and he got his shot immediately. Luis Garcia, Nededes, Ryan Zefferjon, and Nico Cavadas, who both made their debuts last year. So I think that our MO is to acquire major league ready players, and so that's why I considered it as more of a retool than a rebuild.
And I can see that. I think that if Anaheim decides to plug those young guys in earlier, that it could be more towards that, retool mode, a team that battles closer to 500 than well under 500. I just think that it's a matter of when they decide to employ the young talent on an everyday basis and let them go out there, take their lumps, have those growing pains. But if they can go out there on a nightly basis with that young talent and not so much rely on the older guys like the Jorge Solers, Anthony Rendon types, when you can go out there and you give the young guys their shot, that's where you start to really see the future of the team. So I think it depends on how early they let those young guys play the game, whether or not it's more of a retool or a full-scale rebuild.
Yeah, I definitely see your point there.
Now, was there anything else that you wanted to add in about the Angels?
I think that the whole building the team around Trout idea has to have sailed. And when you're looking at this roster, it's got to be about the future. You have to be focusing more on the O'Hoppes, the Netos, the Jose Soriano, who really broke out in his first year as a starter last year, the Ben Joyce, who broke out as soon as he added that splinker. And he's working on some more pitches too this offseason. So we have some exciting youth. And if you get anything out of guys like Trout or Rendon, who's already on the IL, or Robert Stevenson when he comes back, I think that that's just a bonus, and that any progression in the win total this year is going to be a plus for us, and it's not going to be that hard to do considering we lost 99 games last year.
No, for sure. And I also think that the move of Trout to right field is going to help him stay healthy. I think not having the grind of playing center field is going to be something that is going to help his ability. As a Yankee fan myself, seeing Aaron Judge go out there and play center field every day, it's a wear and tear on the body. And for someone like Trout that plays so hard with so much passion, with so much just drive, he wants to be the best ever. And he plays like that. And that also tears, down the body. So I think kind of almost hiding him, for lack of a better word, in the corner is going to be something that will help him kind of preserve himself physically. So I think that's going to be an interesting move as well. But obviously, then at that point, it leads to who's playing center. Is it Moniak?
Yes.
Is it Adele?
Yeah.
What do you do with that spot? So it's going to
Right.
be interesting to see what Anaheim decides to do now that they've made the move to move Trout to right field.
Absolutely. Mickey Moniak has better defensive metrics than peak Mike Trout, actually, through his young career so far. So we know that Mickey can do it. Joe Adele was a Gold Glove finalist last year, and he has a lot of athleticism. He is in the 90th percentile. I don't have it offhand, but I know he's definitely higher than 90th for sprint speed, and he's a guy who can really run it down. If we give him that time in spring training and he proves that he can do it, I think the upside in his bat is worth it to play him in center field. But if he can't do it, then Mickey Moniak is able to, and we know that. Perry Manasian was actually talking today about the leadership role as well that comes with center field, and how Mike Trout not having to worry about the two guys on his right and left in the smaller right field is going to help him. And I think that that's the big piece that they're going to be looking for Joe Adele to pick up on in spring training, is that leadership role out in center field. Because Mickey Moniak has proved he can do it. He can be a center fielder, and he's a left-handed hitter, so he can hit right-handed pitchers most of the time. And then you can have guys like Trout or Joe Adele or even Scott Kingery, who's gotten a lot of time in center field, not only in the major leagues with the Phillies, but in the minors as well, behind him. But otherwise, I think it should be Joe Adele's job to lose in spring.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean Joe Adele was a top prospect as well, so we know that pedigree has been there in terms of for the Angels, and they, wanted him so highly. There was a lot of trades early on. Their teams were trying to acquire his services, and the Angels were holding on to him for good reason. So this is now kind of that time to put up what was believed in him to be there.
Yeah. And he did hit 20 home runs last year and stole 15 bases. So he's got that 2020 potential. He got thrown out 11 times as well, so maybe that stolen base decision making isn't quite there yet. And there are definitely other spots where he's lacking as well. He swings and misses a lot. He has a long swing as well, so he gets beat with velocity a lot, but he also swings the bat harder than a lot of guys around the league. He's got a 98th percentile bat speed, so he's definitely got a lot of premium raw talent.
For sure. And if he can kind of, start to put that together, it's definitely going to be a guy that is, really going to start shocking some people that haven't been paying attention to Joe Adell.
Yes.
So for sure, definitely a team to pay attention to, a team to watch. There's going to be some very intriguing things that are going to be happening out in Anaheim with the Angels in 2025 for sure. So Noah, let everybody know where they can find you at if they want more of your thoughts on the Angels and baseball as a whole.
Yeah, well, I write at InsideHalos.com, and I'm on X right there at Pohle Noah. And I tweet pretty often. And it would be great if you guys followed me. And it was great to be on here with you. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a blast.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely a fun conversation. Being able to talk baseball and to talk with someone that has such a love for the sport and a love for the Angels. So definitely appreciate you jumping on with me in this series that we're doing here at the State of the Franchise. Now, before we get out of here, a couple of news and notes. Obviously, on the YouTube side of things, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell for post notifications as we continue to try to grow this community. If you're on the audio side, make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review, as it does help us continue to grow the fan base. And for those that may not know, we do have our merchandise shop at Printify, so baseball-banter-merch.printify.me. If you want to support the channel, it does help us continue to build and grow as the season goes on. So once again, I want to thank Noah for joining me here to discuss the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim in our State of the Franchise series. So thank you once again for joining me, Noah. It was an absolute pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. Seriously, it was a really good time.
Absolutely. And once again, my name is Jeremy Laracuente, and this has been the Baseball Banter Broadcast. Peace.